The following is a presentation of Surprise Church. El siguiente programa es la presentación de la iglesia Surprise.
My name is Michelle, and I am a licensed mental health counselor in town, and I also have some experience teaching at the higher education level, and I'm a registered yoga teacher. Just this recently, this last summer, I opened a nonprofit called Inner Groundwork, and our mission is very similar to what you guys talk about here with helping families win. And so what an honor and blessing to be here. So first of all, thank you. Thank you to all of you, and thank you to you for bringing us in to talk about helping families win. Part of what my frustration as a mental health counselor was that there's so much mental and behavioral hurting going on in our community, and the only way for people to get help is to go to individual counseling, which is such an important thing, and couples counseling is such an important thing, but it's just the only option. And so we're here to offer an alternative option, and so we offer services that are geared towards values-based living, geared toward living a more mindful life, offering services to raise emotional intelligence, resiliency, and protective factors. And so we just take behavioral health a little bit different approach. And so we've been offering a lot of services in the last couple months that have been really going well and that I'm passionate to continue doing.
Awesome. Well, thank you. And we just decided that we'd try to create as much dialogue as possible rather than purely monologue-style sermons. And so we do things like, we'll talk a little bit later today about the DNA groups, which is starting this next week. And I hope you all can dive into that to help foster dialogue within our community. But also on Sunday morning, we want to take some time today and hopefully in the future to be able to respond to some of the questions and concerns that are coming up in real time in our lives of our individuals and families. So let's just dive in because we'll get to, like I said, as many as we can. And she'll just reflect from her experience working with folks, both in her nonprofit work, but also her therapeutic work. And I might throw in a nugget or two if she doesn't say all the smart stuff first before I do. So first one that comes, and this probably resonates with a lot of us, is every day seems like a frantic race in my household, and we're exhausted and tired by dinner time, which usually includes lots of bickering. In this day and age, how can we not be so chaotic and frantic in our lifestyle? What would you say to that?
Well, first let me disclose that I have 3 children, all within 2 years apart from each other, and so I get this. This is a work for me, too. I am not an expert. You guys have as much wisdom as me. I can share my own personal experience, and I can tell you that it's a work in progress for us all. But this is such a relevant thing. I hear it all the time. And the most amazing thing is when people talk about this, their solution is a good one, but it's often around time management things. So like, I'm so stressed. I've got so much to do. I've got, we're doing this, this, and this, and then my kids aren't listening, and and I just need to get organized. I need to have better time management. I need to. Right? And sometimes that's an important part of the puzzle, but oftentimes I say, okay, but let's also stop doing and take a step back and let's re-look at why we're doing what we're doing, right? Why are we doing all of this? And oftentimes their souls are hurting, and their souls are hurting because they know that we are doing too much, and this isn't what I'm here to do. This really isn't my important work, but this is the work I feel like I have to do. I can't miss this. I can't do this. We can't miss out on this. And in the meantime, they're saying they don't have time to, have their conversation with the spouse they've needed to have, or time to really listen to what their child is saying instead of assume that their child is misbehaving, right? And so the first answer, I think, isn't time management. It's stepping back and saying, why? And most of the time, it's our ego. It's our ego saying, I have to do this because that's what makes me good enough. That's what makes me successful. That's what that person's doing, and I envy that person, right? And so we get stuck in this hamster wheel of, I need to do this, and in the meantime, our house is frantic, and it doesn't feel right. It doesn't feel good, right? And so that's kind of the first step. And then sometimes at that point, it takes a meeting, a sit down with yourself to say, okay, well, I know this is what I don't want. What can I let go of? And oftentimes, it's a lot. We can let go of a lot and still be okay because we don't have to prove ourselves to anybody at any time. So we could let go of all of it, and we are still perfectly okay. And so really, it's a harder question and process to resolve than time management. But that's kind of, the process I've been going through is how can we pare back and know that this is what I'm here to do. This, not all of that. That make sense?
It's interesting because we have a number of therapists who attend our church, I think because they realize that we all need so much help here or something, I don't know. But that is exactly what they all say. I say, what? Because I just find the question fascinating. You work with hundreds and thousands of people who need help, who want help, who are like any one of us, but are willing to probably admit it. What do you see the most? And the number one answer that the therapists give me is, I'm not good enough.
Yeah.
And I do stuff that causes more problems for me, or I allow other people to do things to me because I don't feel like I'm good enough. And even a high ego person who seems arrogant or overconfident, a CEO, a professional athlete, someone who seems way up here, they struggle with the same thing. They don't feel like they're good enough.
And being able to recognize that is even a major step, because a lot of people, they're on that hamster wheel and they don't know what's driving it. They can't recognize it's because I'm striving to gain my worth. That's not something that they put into their words, but that's what's driving their behavior all the time, right? So it's a major step if you can identify that I'm doing this because I feel like I have to feel worthy, next to my neighbor. And that's a huge step if you can get to that point. But I think that that's something we all wrestle with at some point.
Question.
I am a recovering person of perfectionistic hamster achievement. I've had a lot of years of striving until it was a blunt realization to me one day that this is not what's going to get me to my ultimate end goal. Redefining my success of that end goal was a big game changer, and it's still a work in progress even when you do that.
And I think in Christian terms, when we talk about the gospel is the exact opposite of I'm not good enough. Or maybe it is the finish of that sentence is God knows we don't have it all. He knows He didn't create us to achieve our destiny without Him. Jesus died because He says, yeah, you're not good enough, so let me finish the sentence and live the life that you cannot, die the death that you deserve, and redeem you to God so that it isn't about your performance anymore. It's about a relationship, that you get to be who you are. God accepts you as you are. He refuses to leave you that way, but He doesn't call you to change and grow because you have to or need to be good enough. He's accepted you already. It's like your kids. You would never want your kids, or you never want a child you babysit, a kid down the street to feel like you're only going to be kind to him if he's good enough or she's good enough. That's going to make them feel worse and worse and worse about themselves. And to think that we have a God, a creator who thinks of us that way, that's the gospel. I mean, that's the whole gospel message. Let's move on, because a lot of these are going to tie together, I think, to that same underlying rationale. But technology is a big one. We talk to a lot of parents, a lot of professionals, even people who are retired struggle with boundaries for technology, because you can control your heater in your house through your phone now. You can open your garage doors through your phone. I don't go to the bank anymore. I deposit checks through my phone. So what do you recommend, Michelle, in terms of setting guidelines around technology, both for ourselves and for our households, if there's others dependent upon us making those boundaries?
Yeah, this is a big one. And it's a hard one, and it's one that's going to, each family is going to have a different idea for this. I do have some general guidelines, and I have some really strong reasons why, especially if we're talking young kids. So first of all, technology, when we're talking with young kids, is anything that involves a screen. And so it's TV, it's movies, it's games, it's phones, it's iPads. All of that is technology, even a computer, right? And so the first question to ask yourself is why? Why do we want to be using this technology? What are they using it for? Right? Are they using it because they're bored? That's typically what we're hearing a lot of times is either parents are busy and they don't have time to attend, and so the kids need that something to do, or that's what the kids want to do. The hard part about that is kids' brains are actually rewiring every day when they're developing. And so the more that they have that as their coping strategy for being bored, the more that's the only thing that works for them. And so we're finding with teachers and with anything else that kids are having a hard time getting engaged in things that aren't technology related anymore because their brain is so wired to using it. And so the first question is why? Is it because it's serving our family's value at this point? Is it serving a purpose? Or is it a strategy to just keep them busy? Is it because it's what they want to do? Is it because they're fighting us if they don't have it, right? And so before we talk about how much time they're using it, I'd like to step back and have you just reflect to the why. Is it serving our family purpose in any way, shape, or form, right? Is it helping them, to research something and then we can build that table together after they learn how to do it? Is that a value of ours, or is it one of these other things? And so that's, I think, a really important question. For my child and his particular situation, anytime technology is in the room, he's a completely different child, right? He is no longer engaging, he's just obsessed. Even if the technology is up high on a shelf, if he knows it's there, it's, that's just where his mind is. His brain is no longer available to engage in the present moment with anything else. And so for my family, we have very specific guidelines that work for us. And I know other families' guidelines are a little bit different. The big thing is to do it with intention. However you use technology in your family, do it because that's your intention, not a reactionary thing like, oh, I'm really stressed, I have so much to do, I can't do this, so here, you do this, and I'm gonna do this, we're gonna get all done with this, and then we're gonna go do that, right? Like, that's a lot of what families deal with every day. That can tend to lead to them learning different coping strategies that they get sucked into, right? So, I don't know, what do you have to add to that?
I would, do we have a live question? Like a follow-up?
Oh.
All right.
Basically every day.
Here, use this.
I have a big voice.
Yeah, but
Okay.
could you hear her? Well, that'll make it easy.
Now I have to talk softer because I have a big voice. Anyway, we have a 6-month-old that we watch during the day. She's a nursing 6-month-old. So when she's with mom, she gets settled by nursing and go to sleep. When she's with us, she loves Ed Sheeran songs. And if I don't have Ed Sheeran on when I'm rocking her and putting her to sleep, she fusses at me. The moment I hit a certain soft Ed Sheeran song, she's out. So
Castle by the Hill, which Ed Sheeran song are we talking about here? Castle on a Hill?
Oh, like Perfect or...
Oh, Perfect.
Yeah, really soft and kind of, and if I hit that tone, she instantly falls asleep. So am I wrong in allowing that to happen every time I want to put her to sleep? Or should I try to be flexible so that she's flexible with being able to fall asleep?
Nope. Music is a little different thing. What you're talking about is a soothing strategy for kids, and that's, kids need those soothing strategies, and they need those attachment, those things that help them gain attachment, and that's a totally different thing than a different type of use of technology, right? So that's music, that's soothing techniques. However, that if you don't want it to transcend to when they're, 4 and they can't fall asleep without doing X, Y, or Z with the screen, right? And so music's a little different category. When you transition into screen time, we don't want them dependent on that for coping, right? Because then their brains get wired to that, and then, even as adults, some of us adults, have a hard time falling asleep without scrolling through some sort of social media for a little bit, and that pattern can get developed very early on.
And the only thing I would add would be it's probably better if you would have them listen to Coldplay or U2. Other than that, it's probably fine. But no, I think what you're bringing up too is, we have a lot of co-parenting, double households raising the same child because of divorce or remarriage or whatever, and you don't always have consistency in times of those rules. And so the closer you can get to giving the kid consistency, the better. Sometimes that doesn't work, and former spouses or co-parents can't agree on different things, and then you have to work with the child to say, look, I know there are different ways of doing things. I know your parents have parents, friends' parents do things differently. I know that your mom or your dad do things differently when you're there, but when you're here, here's the expectations, and just trying to cultivate some consistency with kids, that especially as they're getting older, is really important. Hey, we got one that came in live here. We're going to try to get to one more at least if we can. And this is more of a stress about the future. So this probably isn't your situation if this wasn't U.S., but I'm guessing that you're going to see a similar corollary as you think about uncertainties in your future. Here's this question. I'm struggling with the unknown future of my life. I may be going to prison for a few years. By the way, thank you for coming today. Thank you for being here. And I don't want to give up on myself. I mean, if we had a back and forth, I'd want to know a little bit more about that. But what would you just say about future uncertainties, especially when you know something that could be very trying is coming? And how do you just keep it together?
What a good question, and so applicable to all of us because we're all uncertain with all kinds of things. Some of that comes back to faith, believing, and trust in that we are okay, right? We are okay, and we always have the ability to turn inward, and we always have the ability to stop and not let the external situations that's going on impact our ability to stay true to who we are. We always have that ability, no matter how stressful that situation is. If you are a reader, I suggest A Man's Search for Meaning. That's a very good example of a man who was in a very trying situation and always just made that intentional effort to search inwards and say, what does this mean to me? What do I need from this? What is something I can gain from this in every moment? And that helps to not hand your power over to your circumstances, right? If we hand our power over to our circumstances, we are always flailing in the wind, whether or not our life is good or bad, depending on if our situation is good or bad. Mm-hmm. And sometimes if we stay true to course, we plow through those situations a little bit better. And so there's all kinds of resources. I'm happy to talk to you afterwards, too.
She'll be at a table right there next to
do.
where you can register for the marriage retreat.
Yeah.
She'll be sitting there next to that. Looks like there's a milkshake or a can of pop.
It's a tea, yeah.
Tea,
But,
okay.
yep.
It's healthy. It's healthy.
Yep, that's where I'll be. I'm happy to talk to you more. And so much, and this is not just for you, this is for all of us, so much is forgiving ourselves for what we've done. So much is forgiving ourselves for the mistakes that we've made, trusting that it's helping us get to where we need to be. And so, yeah, I'm happy to talk to you. I don't know what do you want to add, Matt?
This is going to be kind of embarrassing, but I forgot the question.
Uncertainty.
Uncertainty of the future. That's it.
Yes.
Okay. My mind goes down a wormhole.
Did I call you? Sorry, I called
No,
you
this is
out.
fine. This is fine. Happens to me all the time. Again, if you're a reader, the best book I've read for this is called You Are What You Think. So if you want to write that down, Google it, Amazon it, Netflix it, whatever you call it. You can see in those of us who struggle with anxiety, which I do, what Michelle said about your circumstances don't have to control you is a massive struggle. We think external stimuli caused me to feel this way. This person did this, I feel this. Life did this, this is my experience. We forget that there's a B in between the A and C. The B is my response, my filter, my relationship to the world that is able to say, okay, that just happened. I do feel emotions, and those emotions are okay, but those emotions do not limit me to staying exactly where I am. They're not who I am. They're a part of who I am, but I'm also filtering this through things I've learned, through wisdom, through things I know are true, whether I feel them to be true or not, and I can talk myself through those emotions, sometimes with other people and therapists and counselors that many of us have found very, very valuable. So just remember that something has happened. In this case, this person has received news about an uncertain, difficult future. Now, it's what I do with life. By the grace of God, in prayer, listening to God's word, reminding myself of God's promises that don't allow this reality to be my total reality. And that's the biggest lie when it comes to anxiety, stress, depression about the future or the past. That is only a part of my reality. There are other things that it can blot out as if there's no good things that exist, that I have to respond with panic or anger, and I don't. Don't give the world permission to control you, because you're responsible in part for your reaction. And I think this is where faith comes in so handy for me, because it's not limited to your own power. That's what God can do in and through you. All right, last question. We have our marriage retreat coming up on the 13th, and there's some questions that all relate to conflict resolution, oftentimes just in general, but especially in families or blended families. Do you have any, when we think about technology, when we think about time management, when we think about boundaries, talk about the importance and the value in specifically in relationships of unplugging and taking a day like what we're planning, and the effect it can have that maybe we don't even think of when we think, well, I'm too busy, that's too touchy-feely, whatever. Just talk about what you've seen, if you would, when couples give themselves permission to invest like that.
Yeah, so important. And, the screen that you guys had up with making space, I just can't emphasize it enough, is that we have to do the work to make the space for what we want to cultivate in our life. We have to do that, because if we don't set the intention to make space for what we want to make time for in our life, it'll get run over by all this stuff that feels urgent. And, there's this quadrant, I don't remember who came up with it or when or how, but there's a quadrant of things that are important and urgent and all of these things. And if we don't set space and intention for these things that are important, our marriage, our kids, ourselves, all the urgent stuff will take over, and you feel too busy. And when I've done so much work with couples over the years, and it's always, we don't have time to sit down and talk about this because we're doing this, and this. And it's all, I've heard that more than anything else. And I get busy life, I get that. But that's when we decide, what are we making space for? And to really be present in that space. And if it's a full day, awesome. If it's 10 minutes a night, every night, just as awesome, right? So find what works for you, but that time of really being there with the intention of serving that good that you need for yourself, whether it be your marriage, your kids, yourself, whatever, you need to do that, because otherwise you will lose yourself, right? 10 years down the road, and you don't know where you're at because that space hasn't been there.
Well, I just want to thank you. We're going to do it again, and it might be totally different, or it might be similar, but thank you for taking the time to give us some of your wisdom. Would you guys thank Michelle for me as well?
Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah. And she'll, like I said, she'll be at the table. You can take off. She'll be at the table there if you want to meet her, get some information on Inner Groundwork. They do some fabulous courses, and some of you, I know, have taken advantage of them here in the community. Just courses for kids to manage stress, and for parents, for entrepreneurs. I saw one of her courses for entrepreneurs. I'm like, oh, that's really cool. I want to end with just a meditation as the band comes back up. I want to end with just a biblical backdrop to put all this together. So you leave feeling like you heard a message, and you did. I think there's a lot of stuff that's going to connect to what I say now. I want to take you to Ephesians 4. It's a chapter we've been dwelling in as we're talking about helping families win. Listen to this. As Michelle and I talked about all the things we do just because we feel like we have to do things, getting back to that why at the bottom of the well, like what is driving that frantic thing that I keep on adding things or focusing on so many things that may not have the import that the specific thing that I'm neglecting does, that become my excuse for not tending to those things. Listen to this. Ephesians 4, I tell you this and insist on it in the Lord, that you must no longer live as the Gentiles do, people who did not know Jesus but now do, in the futility of their thinking. They're darkened in their understanding and separated. This is a miserable place to be, separated from the life of God because the ignorance that's in them due to the hardening of their hearts. When we are separated from God, our hearts start to get hard, and here's what happens. Having lost all sensitivity, when you have total insensitivity, you are numb to the things of God. God could knock loudly and you don't hear him. He could push firmly and you don't feel him. He could scream at the top of his lungs and we can't hear him. We have turned and hardened and we've separated ourselves from him and we're insensitive. And now watch what we do when we are insensitive to things of God. This is amazing. Having done that, they have given themselves over to sensuality, to indulge in every kind of impurity, and they're full of greed. This is what people do when we are turned away from the things of God, the God who made us. We are so numb and yet so desperate to feel that we pack as much feeling and indulgence into our lives as we can possibly, because we want to feel something. We want to feel life, even though we've coated our hearts with death. When our hearts are hardened towards God, our desperation to feel leads to greed and indulgence. I become a person that's all about getting, hoarding, feeling something. Paul goes on. This is the antidote This is the answer, and it always involves voices from outside of ourselves that we allow ourselves to receive. Because when my heart is hard and numb, no one gets to speak into my life unless I give them permission to. Listen to Paul speaking into their lives. Therefore, however, is not the way you learned, the way of life you learned when you heard about Christ and were taught in accordance with the truth that is in Jesus. That's not your story, he says. I know you're living a different story right now, and it's not who you are. Do you have anybody in your life that can say to you, that's not who you are? That's not how you learn Jesus. You were taught with regard to your former way of life to put off your old self, which is being corrupted by its deceitful desires. Feelings always lie to us. Or I should say often lie to us, not always. When I marry couples, I say, your feelings lead you to get married. When you get married, oftentimes your feelings lead you away from your marriage. Feelings can be deceitful, especially if we've turned from God. Instead, we're told to be made new in the attitude of our minds, to put on the new self, created to be like God in righteousness and holiness. In other words, Paul is given permission to speak into his reader's story, and he tells them their true identity when they're tempted to believe a different one. In other words, when someone knows your true story, when someone knows that you have embraced the gospel, that Jesus is real to you, that you define your identity based on him, then they can also tell you to get back to your true identity. If they know your true story, they can point you back to your true identity. Dude, that's not, look, you're hungover again, man. You're neglecting your role as a parent, a spouse. You're hurting your family. That's not who you are. You're hardened toward God, and I know you want to feel something. This is not who you are, though. You're being abusive. Your language to your coworkers and your subordinates is abusive. You're being manipulative. You've got to stop. That's not how God used his power for you. It's not who you are. I know who you are. That's not who you are. So as we do this next month, DNA groups, this is a simple step, 3-step plan to say, hey, look, get a couple people who can remind you who you are. Every week, discover something about your need for Jesus. Come and share it, and let them nurture your identity and call you to act out of that identity. That's all this is. This is people knowing who your true story is and calling you back to it. And I promise you, if you have people that do that in your life story will play out with great joy. Even if you're anticipating prison. We went to prison last month, and we did worship there, and man, people got saved. They committed to being the best prisoners they could be there. The jailer came up to us and was just excited about Jesus and wanted to talk and come to worship. And it's like, God goes everywhere with you. Maybe next Sunday for our community meal, you want to sit down with your DNA group and just hang out and just start this journey together. But we're asking the question in closing, what if each of us discovered every week an area of our lives that need the gospel? And then we shared it with people who are ready to encourage us. How would your life be different? If someone had permission to speak when your heart started to get hard, if someone had permission to nurture you when you started to become insensitive to the things of God, when your life might go this way as you move farther and farther down that path, but because someone says that's not who you are, because I know Jesus is a part of your story, and let me call you back to your true identity in Jesus, what would happen? How would your life play out? What if? Stand and pray with me. Heavenly Father, as we close today, in Jesus' name, I pray that you surround us with the right people that can call us back to our true identity, that know our true story, that can remind us when we are living a different version of life that is about greed and indulgence rather than having a full heart, full of the love of Jesus, that is meant to brim over into the lives of people around us, that is focused on giving rather than getting, because we have gotten everything we need from the Son of God who loved us and gave himself for us. We want our families to win, Lord Jesus. And that only happens when